My brother announced he was marrying my ex on the same night my mother handed me the bill for dinner. I thought that was the worst thing my family could do to me. I was wrong. My name is Nora. I'm 29 now. My brother Caleb is 31. Growing up, he was the center of every room we ever stood in. When Caleb laughed, people laughed louder. When Caleb got angry, people rushed to calm him down. When I got angry, people told me to lower my voice. That was our normal. My mother called him her heart. She called me her helper. That sounds sweet at first. It is not sweet after 20 years. Heart got chances, helper got chores, heart got excuses, helper got lectures. If Caleb forgot to do something, my mother said he had a lot on his mind. If I forgot, she said I was careless. If Caleb spent too much money, my father said young people make mistakes. If I bought one thing for myself, my mother asked if I was trying to be irresponsible. My father was not loud, but he was not innocent either. He hid behind silence. He hated conflict more than unfairness. That matters later. When I was 9, Caleb broke the old lamp in our grandmother's living room and blamed me. I got sent to bed without dessert. He winked at me from the hallway. When I was 13, he borrowed the money our aunt mailed me for school shoes. He spent it on video games. My mother said family shares. When I was 16, he wrecked the used car my parents bought for both of us. He had it every weekend. I had it on Tuesdays if he was in a good mood. When he hit a mailbox and cracked the front bumper, my father told me not to tell the insurance company Caleb had been driving. I remember standing in the kitchen with my backpack still on, thinking, of course this will somehow become my problem too. That was the shape of my whole childhood. Nothing huge, nothing clean enough for outsiders to call abuse. Just 1,000 small thefts, 1,000 small rewrites, 1,000 times I was asked to make room for someone else's mess. By high school, I had learned a rule. Do not react in public if I cried. My mother said I was dramatic. If I got angry, Caleb smirked and asked if I was on my period. If I stayed quiet, people called me mature. What they meant was useful. The only person who saw it clearly was my grandmother, my mom's mother. Her name was Edith, but everybody called her Nana Edie. She lived in a narrow brick house with a tiny garden and wind chimes that never stopped moving. Her house smelled like lemon soap, tea, and old paper. When I was little, I spent Saturdays there, helping her trim roses and sort receipts in biscuit tins. She watched people the way some people read weather. One afternoon when I was 15, Caleb had just thrown a fit because my mother would not let him take cash from her purse. 10 minutes later, she handed him $40 anyway. I was at Nana Edie's table, slicing peaches too hard. She looked at my hands and said, "You're cutting fruit like you're settling a score." I laughed. Then I cried. I told her I felt horrible for resenting my own brother. Nana set down her teacup and said, "Resentment isn't the word. You're tired of being volunteered." I still remember that sentence. Tired of being volunteered. That was exactly it. Anytime Caleb needed help, I was volunteered. Anytime he needed forgiveness, I was volunteered. Anytime he needed money. Time rides, excuses, cover stories, emotional labor, or silence, I was volunteered. Nana saw me. My mother hated that she did. If Nana praised my grades, my mother said Caleb was more creative. If Nana praised my work ethic, my mother said Caleb was under pressure. If Nana said I was dependable, my mother said Caleb had a big heart in our house. Praise worked like a seesaw. If I went up, somebody pushed harder to lift Caleb higher. College changed things for a while. I got a scholarship to a school 3 hours away. It was the first place where I felt normal. People listened when I spoke. My roommates asked before borrowing my clothes. My professors remembered my papers. No one acted like my boundaries were a personal insult. I studied accounting. I worked weekends at a bookstore cafe. I slept too little and loved almost every minute. That was also where I met Ryan. He worked in the campus gym and had a calm face that made people tell him things. We were together for 3 years. He was not perfect. He forgot birthdays once in a while. He chewed too loud. He hated folding laundry and thought one good apology solved everything. Still, he was kind, or I thought he was. By senior year, we were making plans, not big dramatic plans, just the small ones, where we might live after graduation, how we would split rent, what kind of dog we might get one day. I told my family about him too early. That was my mistake. The first time Ryan visited my parents' house, Caleb looked him up and down and said, "You're dating my sister? Man, you must be patient." Everybody laughed. Even Ryan smiled. I did too because I always did. That is the danger of old patterns. Sometimes you laugh before your own pain can speak. Caleb liked Ryan right away. Too much, honestly. He invited him to watch games, texted him memes, added him to group chats. At first, I told myself it was nice, that maybe my family was trying. Then little things started happening. Ryan would bring up stories about my childhood that I had not told him. Private stories, humiliating ones. Like the time I got sick on the school bus in 6th grade. Or the time my mother made me wear a hand-me-down bridesmaid dress to a church event. And everybody stared. When I asked how he knew those things, he would shrug and say Caleb mentioned them. I told Caleb to stop. He laughed and said I was too sensitive. Later that year, Ryan canceled dinner with me because Caleb got dumped and wanted company. I said okay, Then it happened again, then again. There was always some reason. Caleb needed help moving a couch. Caleb needed a ride. Caleb was drunk. Caleb was having a rough week. I told myself brothers and boyfriends can be friends. I told myself I was being petty. I told myself a lot of things that kept me from naming what was happening. Then, 6 weeks before graduation, Ryan sat me down outside the library and told me he needed space. My stomach dropped the second he said the word. Space is never just space. He said he felt overwhelmed. He said we had grown apart. He said he needed to figure out who he was after college. All the usual soft, careful words people use when they want to leave without feeling like the bad guy. I cried in the campus parking lot after that. Not graceful crying, the kind where your chest hurts and your nose runs and you keep wiping your face with fast food napkins because that is all you have. 2 months later, I found out he was spending time with my brother. Not casual time, not accidental time, intentional time. Ryan had moved back to our hometown for a job, so had I, and somehow he and Caleb were suddenly inseparable. I asked Caleb about it. He smiled like he had been waiting. Then he said, "Relax. He likes hanging out with people who don't make everything heavy." That sentence sat in my ribs for weeks. A month later, my cousin sent me a screenshot from Instagram. Ryan and Caleb were at a rooftop bar with the caption, "Built different." I blocked them both for a week. Then my mother called and told me I was making things awkward by forcing people to choose sides. There it was always the same trick. Someone hurts me. Then I become the problem for noticing. I wish that had been the end of it. It wasn't even close. On my 24th birthday, my parents took us to a steak place downtown. I almost did not go. My mother insisted. She said the family needed to move forward. That phrase should have warned me, move forward in my family. Always meant bury your feelings and smile. Dessert had just come when Caleb tapped his glass. I remember the sound, bright, sharp, too cheerful. He stood up with Ryan beside him and said, "Since we're all here, we wanted you to hear it from us first." My whole body went cold. Then Ryan reached into his jacket and pulled out a ring box. Not for me, for Marissa. A woman with bright hair, loud laughs, and perfect teeth. The daughter of one of my mother's church friends. My mother burst into tears. Happy tears. My father started clapping. The waitress smiled because she thought she was watching something beautiful. I sat there staring at the candle between us, while Caleb announced he and Marissa were getting married in 6 months. Then my mother turned to me and said, "Nora, sweetie, since this dinner is really about family news, can you put it on your card and we'll settle later?" I looked up so fast my neck hurt. I thought I had misheard her. I had not. That was the first line of this story for a reason. My brother announced his wedding on my birthday, and my mother handed me the bill. It sounds almost funny now. It was not funny then. I paid because I was too shocked not to. My hands shook so badly, I signed the receipt twice. Outside in the parking lot, Caleb put an arm around me and said, "Don't be weird about this, okay? Marissa already thinks you're intense." I stared at him. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, because if I did not laugh, I was going to scream that night. I sat in my car outside my apartment for 40 minutes. No music, no phone, just the steering wheel under my hands and the old knowledge settling in again. Nothing in that family happened without a cost to me. By then I had a job at a regional accounting firm. I was good at it. I liked spreadsheets, order, numbers that meant something. Numbers do not gaslight you. They do not cry when caught. They do not call you difficult for remembering. Work kept me steady. Then my grandmother got sick. It started small, a fall in the hallway, an overnight stay at the hospital, then more appointments, then tests. Then the kind of careful phone calls that make your stomach drop before a single word is said. She had heart failure. Manageable at first, then less manageable. I started driving her to appointments because my mother was too emotional and Caleb was so busy with the wedding. That meant me, obviously. I did not mind helping Nana. I minded the way helping was assumed. I would leave work early, sit with her through scans, pick up prescriptions, then stop for groceries on the way back to her house. Sometimes I was so tired my eyes blurred at red lights. One evening, after I had brought her soup and reorganized her pill box, Nana looked at me and said, "You know you can say no to them?" I laughed softly. Then I said, "It never changes anything." She looked right at me and said, "Maybe it changes you." That stayed with me. Maybe it changes you. Around that time, Caleb and Marissa's wedding planning turned into a full family circus. Every conversation was about flowers, chairs, showers, parties, favors, playlists, seating charts, and endless tiny crises that somehow required my labor. Can you pick up candles? Can you stuff invitations? Can you help Marissa with the shower spreadsheet? Can you design the budget tracker? Can you meet the florist? Can you skip Nana's appointment just this once because Marissa is having a meltdown? No! I said no that time. It shocked everybody. My mother actually blinked. Then she smiled the fake smile she uses when she is angry in public and said, "Of course, family is just all pulling in different directions right now." That sentence made me feel sick because it sounded mild. Reasonable. If you had not lived with her, you would never hear the knife in it. Later that day, Caleb sent me a text. Wow. Didn't know one doctor visit was more important than my wedding. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed, Nana has heart failure, he replied. You always have to make things dark. That was Caleb's whole personality in one sentence. He could set your house on fire and still complain about the smoke. Nana got worse that winter. I started spending nights at her house 2 or 3 times a week. Then most nights. She hated being alone after dark because her breathing got worse when she lay flat. So I moved a basket with my clothes into the guest room and started living between places. It was the best and hardest time of my life. Best because being with Nana felt honest. Hardest because the rest of my family treated me like unpaid staff. My mother came by twice a week with casseroles she wanted credit for making. Caleb came by when there were witnesses. Marissa came once in a cream coat, looked around Nana's living room and said, "This place has potential if somebody modernized it." Nana told her she preferred things that had survived at least one hard decade. I laughed so hard I almost choked on tea. That old brick house was the one truly valuable property in our family. Everybody knew it. The neighborhood had changed. Restaurants came in, property values rose, developers had been circling for years. Nana always said no. She also owned a small commercial lot 2 streets over that used to hold my grandfather's hardware shop before it closed. The shop was gone. The land remained. I knew the basics. What I did not know was how much of it was still fully in her name. One rainy Thursday while I was sorting bills at her dining table, Nana said, "We should go over my papers." I thought she meant practical things, passwords, insurance, the location of the emergency contacts. She meant more than that. Her lawyer came the following week. A neat man named Howard with silver glasses and a voice that made everything sound like a final draft. He went through folders while I took notes. That was when I found out Nana had updated her estate 2 years earlier. The house would go to me. The commercial lot would go to me too, with a smaller cash gift to my mother, and specific gifts to a few relatives. I just stared at the papers. I asked if Caleb knew. Howard said no. I asked if my mother knew. Howard said Edith had chosen not to discuss details. I looked at Nana and said, "Why me?" She gave me the same look she had given me my whole life when I asked a question with an obvious answer. Then she said, "Because you show up, Nora." My throat closed. No one in my family had ever given me a future before. Not like that. Not clearly. Not without a price attached. I told her I did not want anyone thinking I had influenced her. She snorted. "If I wanted your brother to have that house, I would need a head injury and divine confusion," she said. I laughed until I cried. Then I cried for real. Because being seen that plainly does something to you. It fills a space you stopped admitting was empty. I wish love and fairness had arrived cleanly after that. They did not. About 3 weeks later, my mother found out there were changes to Nana's estate. Not from me, from Caleb. And Caleb found out because he had gone through a folder in Nana's study while looking for a stamp. He was never looking for what he said he was looking for. That Sunday, my parents and Caleb arrived at Nana's house with pie, bright voices and false faces. Marissa came too. She wore heels on wet brick and complained about the driveway. At first there was small talk. Then my mother put down her fork and said, "We hear there have been updates." Nana did not blink. "From whom?" she asked. My mother smiled without warmth. "You know what I mean?" Then Caleb spoke. He said they were just worried I was overwhelmed and might not want the burden of property. The burden of property that almost made me laugh. Marissa jumped in next and said managing real estate can really strain a marriage one day. I was not even engaged. That was how shameless they were. They were already planning my hypothetical husband into the theft. Nana let them talk. Then she turned to Caleb and said, "How many nights have you slept in a chair next to my bed this month?" He looked embarrassed, then annoyed. Then he said, "That's not fair." Nana nodded once. "Correct," she said. Fair would have mattered much earlier. The air changed right there. My mother started crying. Real tears this time. Or at least skilled ones. She said she had always tried to love us equally. I felt my face go hot equally. That word was so absurd, I almost admired its nerve. Then she said something I will never forget. "Nora always makes me feel like a bad mother just because Caleb needs more grace. Needs more grace." As if grace were a limited resource I kept hoarding. I stood up because I could feel years of swallowed rage rising into my throat, but Nana beat me to it. She looked at my mother and said, "Grace is not the same as permission." No one spoke after that. Caleb left first, muttering that everybody was making him the villain. Marissa followed, already texting. My mother took the pie she had brought and carried it out untouched. On the drive home, she left me a voicemail by accident. She thought she had hung up. I heard her say to my father, "She always sits there calm and makes everyone else look cruel." That sentence lived in my head for weeks. I had spent my whole life trying not to be difficult, and somehow even my silence was an accusation to her. After that, things got colder. My mother stopped asking how Nana was. She asked whether Howard had been back. Caleb stopped pretending to help. He started posting vague things online about family betrayal and greed. Marissa shared quotes about loyalty. Then Ryan came back into the story. I had not seen him in almost 2 years. One Friday, I was leaving work when I saw him standing outside my office building. My stomach dropped so hard I had to stop walking. He smiled like we were old friends. He said he just wanted to talk. I should have kept walking. I did not. We sat on a bench across the street with paper cups of coffee cooling between us. He said Caleb had told him things that I was controlling, that I exaggerated, that I had become obsessed with Nana's money. I laughed once, sharp and ugly. Then Ryan said something worse. He said Caleb had asked him whether I ever talked about getting the house. I stared at him. Then he admitted Caleb wanted him to tell people. I had always been fixated on Nana's property. Even back when we dated, my hands started shaking. Ryan looked ashamed. Good, he should have. He said he had not gone along with it. Then he admitted he had not shut it down hard enough either. That sounded familiar. A lot of people in my life had not gone along with the lie. They had just stepped politely aside and let it breathe. I asked why he was telling me now. He looked away and said, "Because I think he's doing something bigger." Those words sat cold in my stomach all night. Bigger how? Ryan did not know, or said he did not. But 2 weeks later, I found out. Somebody filed a complaint with Adult Protective Services claiming I was isolating an elderly relative for financial gain. When the woman from APS knocked on Nana's door, I thought my heart would stop. Nana was in her robe. I was making toast. The woman was polite, professional, and clearly used to ugly things. She asked questions. She looked at rooms. She spoke with Nana alone. She spoke with me alone. It was humiliating, not because I had done anything wrong, because it was designed that way, because somebody wanted the stain even if the accusation failed. Nana was furious after the woman left. Not at the investigator, at my family. She sat in her armchair, breathing hard, and said, "Now they are using the language of concern to do violence." I wrote that sentence down later. The language of concern to do violence. That was exactly it. The case was closed quickly. There was no evidence. Still, the damage was emotional. Nana had trouble sleeping after that. I did too. I started documenting everything. Texts, calls, voicemails, dates, unexpected visits, comments online. I bought a binder and labeled sections, not because I wanted to live that way, because I was finally scared enough to stop hoping decency would save me. Then came the engagement party. Yes, Caleb and Marissa still had one, because of course they did. It was in my parents' backyard under cheap string lights and borrowed chairs. I went only because Nana wanted to see people before she got worse. I drove her there and stayed by her side most of the night. At one point, while I was getting her lemonade, I heard Marissa laughing near the patio. She was talking to 2 women from church. One of them asked if it was awkward having me there. Marissa said Nora has always had a thing about wanting what other people have. We try to include her. I froze behind the drink table. Then Caleb added, "She's been like that since we were kids. Every gift had to be measured. As if I were some greedy little accountant counting everybody else's crumbs." I walked over before I could talk myself out of it. My hands shook, but my voice came out steady. I said, "Interesting. I remember it differently. I remember you taking my birthday money when I was 12. The women went silent. Marissa smiled and said, "Wow, keeping score much there. It was again the old trick. Name the wound as pettiness." I could have backed down. For years I would have. Instead I said no, just remembering accurately. Then I took Nana home. She squeezed my hand in the car and said about time. Caleb and Marissa got married that spring. Ryan was there. That surprised me until I learned Caleb had brought him in to help with business financing advice for the commercial lot. Not my lot, not legally. But in Caleb's mind, everything was already his if he wanted it hard enough. A month after the wedding, Nana had a bad episode in the middle of the night. Her breathing turned shallow, her lips went pale. I called an ambulance and rode with her to the hospital in pajama pants and a sweatshirt with flour on it from the kitchen. My mother came an hour later, complaining that the ER parking was impossible. Caleb came in after sunrise carrying energy drinks. Marissa took one look at the room and asked whether there was a better private floor. I wanted to throw something. Nana stayed in the hospital for 6 days. On day 4, Howard came with updated papers. Nana wanted to sign one final amendment while she still felt strong. I stood outside the room at her request. So did my mother. Caleb paced the hall. Marissa scrolled her phone. When Howard left, my mother cornered him by the elevator and asked whether all the children were being considered. Children. We were grown adults. But when money enters the room, manipulative people become very young very fast. Howard did not answer her. He just walked away. That summer, Nana died. There is no elegant way to write that sentence. One day she was there. The next day her house sounded wrong. Too quiet. I remember the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock in the hall, the pair of reading glasses folded beside her crossword book. I remember standing in her kitchen with one hand on the counter because my knees would not hold me. Grief came in static. Everything looked normal and felt ruined. The funeral was small. Nana had wanted that. No choir, no dramatic flowers. Just family, a few friends, and lemon bars from the bakery she liked. Caleb cried loudly. My mother leaned into people and accepted sympathy with both hands. My father looked smaller than usual. I stood through it like a person underwater. Then came the reading of the will. That was where the real story began. It happened in Howard's office 2 days later. My mother wore navy. Caleb wore grief like a costume that needed tailoring. Marissa looked alert in the way greedy people do around paperwork. Howard read slowly, specific gifts first, then the house, then the commercial lot, then the remainder accounts. My name came up again and again. By the third time, Caleb sat straighter. By the fourth, my mother's face had gone flat. By the fifth, Marissa stopped pretending to be sad. When Howard finished, there was silence for a full 4 seconds. Then Caleb laughed once and said, "That's not happening." Howard folded his hands and said, "It already has." My mother leaned forward. "There must be confusion," she said. "Nora was living there. Edith was vulnerable. Vulnerable, like I had tricked a woman who once balanced a full checkbook with a broken wrist and read 3 newspapers before breakfast." My vision blurred for a second. Howard's voice went colder. "Edith's decisions were documented over time," he said. "There's no question of capacity." Then Caleb said the thing I should have expected. "So the reward for playing nurse is getting everything." I turned to him so fast my chair scraped the floor. My hands shook under the table. I said very quietly, "You used her hospital room to talk about parking and floor upgrades?" For once he had no smart reply. "My mother did," she said. "Nora always knows how to make herself the victim." I almost laughed. There it was, always the same machine. They hurt, I notice. Then my noticing becomes the crime. Howard asked if we needed a break. We did not take one. Instead, my mother started asking legal questions. Could the estate be reviewed? Could the transfer be delayed? Could the commercial lot be sold before distribution? Howard answered calmly. Every answer was some version of no. By the time we left, my mother was no longer crying. She was angry. In the parking garage, Caleb stepped close and said, "Enjoy it while it lasts." I should have paid more attention to that line, because 3 days later, someone got into Nana's house. Nothing huge was missing. A small metal cash box, some folders, a tin where she kept old deeds and receipts. At first, I thought it was random. Then I saw exactly which drawers were open. The ones with estate copies. My whole body went cold. The police came. They asked who had keys. I said me, my mother, Caleb, Nana's cleaning lady. That was all. They asked if I suspected anyone. I froze. I wanted to say yes. I also knew saying it out loud would make things real in a new way. So I said, "I don't know." It was the weakest true sentence I have ever spoken that night. I changed the locks. The next day, I installed cameras. One by the front porch, one at the side gate, one in the hall outside the study. A week later, my mother called and said she wanted to come over to talk calmly. I almost laughed. Calm from her usually meant strategic. I said no, she came anyway, not alone. Caleb and Marissa came with her. I saw all 3 cars outside and felt my stomach drop. I turned on the camera feed from my phone before I opened the door. Then I opened it with the chain still on. My mother looked offended. Caleb looked amused. Marissa looked like she had dressed for a meeting she expected to win. My mother started with family language, grief, confusion, misunderstandings. Then she shifted. She said the kind thing, the fair thing, would be to split the house and lot, the way Edith surely meant in spirit. Spirit, interesting choice of word for people who ignored her actual words. I said Nana had decided what she meant. Caleb's jaw tightened. Then he said, "You think because you slept there for a few months you own history now?" A few months. I had spent 2 years handling meds, bills, laundry, emergency calls, paperwork, meals, appointments, and fear. Marissa stepped in and said maybe we should all be practical. She and Caleb had plans. A business idea. The commercial lot could fund a venue. My whole body went still. There it was, not sentiment, not fairness, a venue, their future. Paid for by the woman they barely visited. I said no, just that, no speech, no explanation, no soft landing. The look on my mother's face was almost childlike, like she had touched fire and could not believe it burned. Caleb laughed once. Then he said, "You're going to regret forcing this," I said. "Leave." My mother put a hand on the door and said, "Nora, don't do something." Dramatic, that word. Dramatic. For the first time in my life, it did not make me shrink. It made me tired. I said louder, "Leave." They did, but not before Marissa looked me dead in the face and said, "No wonder Ryan left. That one landed." Old wounds are still wounds, even when you know the person speaking is small. After they drove off, I slid down the wall in the hallway and cried until my chest hurt. Then I got up and backed up every document I had. A week later, an anonymous post appeared in a neighborhood group online. It said I had isolated my grandmother, manipulated her estate, and was threatening family members who asked simple questions. The wording was careful, almost legal. That scared me more than open anger would have. People commented with pity and disgust. If true, this is evil. Money ruins people. Poor family. My hands shook while I scrolled. Then Ryan called. I almost let it ring out. I answered anyway. He said, "Don't respond publicly yet." I asked why he cared. He said because Caleb had asked him to connect my name with money obsession months earlier and he was finally starting to see the bigger plan. Then Ryan did one useful thing in the whole story. He sent me screenshots, text messages from Caleb, messages about setting a narrative, messages about getting people to think I had pressured Nana for years. One message actually said, if enough people think she's greedy, the legal stuff gets muddy. Legal stuff gets muddy. I sat on my kitchen floor reading that line until my vision blurred. Then I called Howard. He told me to keep every record, answer nothing in public, and prepare for escalation. Escalation came fast. Someone submitted a typed statement claiming Nana had wanted to make a final equal split, but had been discouraged by me. The statement was fake. Sloppy fake, but fake. One witness listed on it had died 3 years earlier. Another had been out of state on the date listed. It still existed. That was the point. Not to win cleanly, to stain, to delay, to exhaust. I went cold all over when Howard told me. Then angry. Not hot angry. Clear angry. The kind that sharpens you. I started building a timeline. Hospital records, visitor logs, texts, email dates, the times my mother claimed she had been with Nana. The days Caleb said he was helping. The days he had actually been on a golf trip, according to his own tagged photos. Numbers help, records help, truth likes paperwork. About a month after Nana died, the camera at the side gate caught movement at 1:17 a.m. I woke to the alert and opened the feed with shaking hands. A hooded figure was trying the gate. The body shape looked familiar. The impatient shoulder jerk looked familiar too. So did the way he checked over his left side before trying the handle again. Caleb? I watched it 4 times, then a 5th. Not suspicion, proof the police took a copy. Nothing dramatic happened right away. Apparently, trying a gate does not move mountains. But it mattered to me, because from that moment on, they could not make me feel crazy again. Around then, I met Daniel, not in a cute way. Not in a way I would have chosen if I were writing fiction. He was a commercial contractor who came to assess the old lot because I was thinking of leasing it for storage or a small office build. He wore work boots, asked practical questions, and did not fill silence just because it existed. He also did something no man in my life had ever really done. He listened without performing. The first time we got coffee, I told him a shortened version. He did not interrupt with solutions or jokes. He just said, "That sounds exhausting." I nearly cried into my cup. Sometimes the most healing sentence is the simplest one. Daniel was steady. He showed up when he said he would. He remembered what I hated. He did not think boundaries were dares. I told almost no one about him at first, especially not my family, I had learned. But families like mine smell joy the way sharks smell blood. Eventually, my mother found out from a tagged photo at a food truck night. Then came the pressure. Bring him to dinner. Don't be weird, we just want to know him. Daniel met them at Thanksgiving. I wish I had trusted my instincts and canceled. The table looked peaceful. Roasted vegetables, 2 pies, cheap candles, my mother pretending softness, Caleb pretending charm, Marissa pretending she had never once tried to poison my life. Under the table, my hands shook anyway. After dinner, while I was rinsing dishes, Caleb came into the kitchen and said, "So Daniel's a step up." I did not turn around. I just said, "Leave him out of this." He laughed. "Oh my God, Nora. Not everything is about taking something from you." That exact phrase, taking something from you, he said it like a joke. Like people always do when they are telling the truth by accident. But that wasn't the worst part. 2 weeks later, Daniel told me Caleb had followed him online and sent him messages. Friendly at first, then personal, then weirdly intimate. He showed me his phone. One message said, "Glad you survived my family. LOL, coffee sometime. Need to know if you also think Nora turns everything into a crisis." My whole body went cold. Daniel had not answered. He blocked Caleb in front of me. I believed him because his face looked disgusted. Still, the old humiliation came back so fast it made me lightheaded. I told Daniel everything then. The money, the lies, Ryan, Nana, the fake statement, the cameras. All of it. When I finished, he took my hand and said, "I'm sorry they taught you to expect theft from people who call it love." I cried so hard it embarrassed me. Not because I was sad, because someone had finally named it cleanly. The next major blow came 6 months later. Howard called and asked whether I knew anyone named Paula Denton. I did not. He said she had signed an affidavit claiming Nana had told her in church that the house should be sold and split for peace, for peace. That phrase again. I asked who Paula Denton was. Turns out she was Marissa's aunt. Of course she was. The case against the fake papers got stronger, not weaker. But it took time. Time is expensive. Time is exhausting. Time is exactly what manipulative people count on. Then Caleb got desperate. How do I know? Because he called my father drunk one night and left a voicemail that my father accidentally forwarded to me instead of deleting. In the voicemail, Caleb said, "If she would just split it, none of this would be happening." That line changed something in me. Not because it was surprising, because it was the truth with all the makeup removed. None of this was about fairness. It was extortion by chaos. Make enough noise and maybe Nora will pay to make it stop. That had been the plan since childhood. Push until I surrender. Push until I apologize. Push until I finance, smooth, absorb, and carry what somebody else refuses to. I listened to that voicemail 3 times. Then I sat in my kitchen and said out loud, "No more." The words sounded strange in the room. Strong and new, no more. That became my rule. No more private conversations, no more trying to reason with unreasonable people, no more family meetings. No more explaining my pain to people who required it to function. Daniel proposed in a way that still makes me smile. Not in public, not at a restaurant, at the old commercial lot at sunset, while we were standing in the weeds talking about what might one day be built there. He pulled a ring from his jacket pocket and said, "I don't care what grows here as long as I get to build a life near you." I laughed and cried at the same time, then I said yes. For 24 hours I told no one except my best friend Lena. I wanted one clean day. Then my mother saw the ring when I met her for coffee to exchange tax papers. By dinner everybody knew by morning. Caleb texted me, "Didn't think you'd move that fast." Guess desperation really does work wonders. I stared at the message and felt almost nothing. That scared me more than anger, because it meant something had died. Not hope, not love, just the need for his approval. A few days later, my mother called and said we had to fix things before the wedding. I asked what exactly needed fixing. She said, "The family cannot go into an event this big divided, as if I had built the wall by myself." She wanted lunch downtown, public place, neutral ground. I agreed because by then I was done hiding. My mother arrived first. Caleb arrived second. Marissa arrived late in white pants and fake concern. My father came too, looking tired in a way that made him seem older than he was. For 20 minutes my mother spoke in loops. Healing, misunderstandings, pressure, family strain. Then she said what she had really brought me there to hear. She wanted Caleb to walk me down the aisle. I laughed out loud. I could not help it. Caleb looked insulted. My mother said there was no need to be rude. Rude. That word again. I asked why they would think that was possible. She said, "Because appearances matter there." It was. Not closeness, not repair. Photos. They wanted photos that lied. I said no. Caleb said I was punishing everybody for old history. I looked right at him and said, "Forgery is not old history." The table went quiet. For once my father spoke. He said, "Enough." We all looked at him. I waited for the rest. It never came. He did not choose truth. He chose volume control. That was my father in one word. Enough. Not enough to protect me. Just enough to stop the sound. I paid my part of the bill and left. In the parking garage, my hands shook so badly I dropped my keys twice. That night, I made the final decision. My mother, Caleb, and Marissa were not invited to the wedding. I told Daniel first, then Lena, then I sent my father a short email. Given the repeated harassment, false statements, and boundary violations, Caleb, Marissa, and Mom will not be invited. "You're welcome to attend alone if you choose," he replied 2 days later with one line. I wish things were different. Not "I'm sorry," not "I understand," not "I support you." Just a wish with no owner. Invitations went out a week later. 2 days after that, the last act began. Caleb posted a photo online of him looking miserable in his car, with the caption, "Hard to lose a sister while she's still alive." People flooded the comments. "Stay strong, man. Family is everything. Some people get greedy." Marissa shared it with a broken heart emoji. I nearly threw my phone. Lena came over, took it out of my hand, and said, "Do not bleed for free." That sentence helped. Do not bleed for free. So instead of reacting, I kept collecting. Then the real twist landed. One Friday afternoon, Howard called and asked if I was sitting down. I was not. I sat. He said somebody had tried to contact a local title company claiming to represent the estate in an emergency sale discussion related to the commercial lot. My vision narrowed. What? Who? The contact email used a fake domain that almost matched Howard's office. Almost sloppy enough to fail, close enough to scare me. The title company had called Howard directly because one clerk noticed the wording felt off. That clerk may have saved me months of hell. My whole body went cold. Then hot, then cold again. It was no longer just family pressure. It was active fraud. I asked Howard what came next. He said, very carefully, "We stop handling this like hurt feelings." That was the line, the dividing line, before and after. Before, I was still half treating it like a nightmare that might end with a serious talk. After that, I understood. This was greed wearing family skin. The police got more involved. Howard got sharper. Daniel changed passwords, backed up files, and installed another camera at my apartment just in case. Lena helped me build a detailed timeline for every incident from the break-in to the false social posts. Then something almost funny happened. Ryan helped, not because he suddenly became noble, because Caleb had started turning on him too. Apparently, when manipulative people run out of fresh targets, they recycle old ones. Ryan sent me more screenshots, messages where Caleb bragged that if they pushed hard enough, I would split the lot just to make the noise stop. One line made me sit down on the floor. Mom says Nora always folds if you make the room uncomfortable enough. There it was, my whole life in one sentence. Make the room uncomfortable enough. That was the family business model. I stared at the screenshot until tears blurred it. Then I stopped crying. Something in me had gone past grief, past outrage into certainty. The wedding was 10 days away when the final crack appeared in my father. He showed up alone at my apartment on a Sunday afternoon. He looked tired, smaller, ashamed, maybe. I let him in. He stood by the kitchen counter like a man waiting for weather to change. Finally, he said, "Your mother wants me to ask for peace." I almost laughed. Peace, always peace, meaning surrender. I asked, "Do you?" He looked at the floor. Then he said, "I want this to stop." There it was. Not truth, not justice, silence. I asked whether he knew about the fake title email. He did not answer for too long. My chest tightened. Then he said quietly, "I knew they were upset." That was not an answer. I asked again. He sat down hard and whispered, "I told Caleb to drop it." So yes, he knew enough. Maybe not everything. Enough. I felt something inside me settle. Not peace. The end of confusion, I said. "Then you can leave too." He looked stunned. Maybe because I had never said anything that clean to him before. At the door, he turned and said, "Families survive by forgiving." I said, "Some families survive by choosing one person to absorb everything." He had no answer. He left. I locked the door and cried harder than I expected. Not because I regretted it, because I had spent my whole life waiting for him to be braver than comfort. He wasn't. 2 weeks later, the police interviewed Caleb and Marissa. Then my mother. I do not know every detail. I know my mother called me 12 times that day. I did not answer. Caleb left a voicemail full of rage and static. At one point he hissed, "You think you're so smart? But you're ruining all of us." All of us. Interesting phrase. Not himself. Not me. All of us. The next morning, my aunt called and said my mother was telling people I had gone nuclear. Maybe I had, but not first. Never first. The wedding was in an old greenhouse outside the city. Glass walls, white lights, simple tables, no church politics. No family stage, just the people who loved us and had earned the right to witness joy. The morning was calm. Too calm. Lena zipped my dress in the dressing room while Daniel's sister fixed my hair. For 1 whole hour I felt peaceful. Then Lena looked out the side window and said, very carefully, "Nora, your family is here." My stomach dropped. Then she added, "And Caleb is filming." Of course he was. Of course I walked to the window and looked down. My mother was in pale pink. Marissa was in cream. Caleb was in a dark suit holding his phone chest high like evidence for a future lie. My hands started shaking. Lena touched my shoulder and said, "You don't have to go out there." But I did, not alone. Daniel came with me. So did Howard, who was invited by then, not just as a lawyer, but because he had earned his seat. At the entrance, my mother was arguing with the venue manager. Caleb saw me and switched on tears so fast it almost impressed me. He said loudly, "I just wanted to fix this before your big day." A stage. Always a stage. My mother stepped forward and said, "Please don't do this in front of everyone." "Do what? Exist honestly?" I said, "You were not invited." Caleb cried harder. Then he delivered the line he had clearly rehearsed. "I know you hate me, but I can't lose my sister too." Guests had started gathering near the greenhouse doors. I could feel eyes on me. Old panic rose. The old instinct said, "Keep it quiet, make it small, do not embarrass the family." Then I looked at Daniel, then Lena, then Howard. Then I looked through the glass at the room we had built for truth, and something inside me clicked into place. Not rage, clarity. I said loud enough for the entrance and half the greenhouse to hear, "You filed false reports, tried to steal Nana's property, sent fake, legal emails, and built a whole campaign to call me greedy because you thought I would split the estate to buy silence. Leave silence." Real silence. Caleb's tears stopped for half a second. My mother went white. Marissa's face emptied out. Then my mother recovered and said, "How dare you make accusations like that here?" Howard stepped forward before I could answer. He said, calm as winter, "She dares because there is evidence." That changed the room. Caleb lowered his phone a little. My mother looked around and realized the audience was not automatically hers. Then Caleb did what he always did when cornered. He attacked. He pointed at me and shouted, "You always thought you were better than us. Nana pitied you because nobody else could stand you." Old pain hit first. Then something stronger rose behind it. Not shame. Not this time. Truth. I said, "Nana trusted me because I showed up. You showed up for paper." A sound moved through the guests behind me. Not quite a gasp, more like recognition. Marissa tried to laugh it off. She said, "This is insane." Lena stepped forward and said, "Do you want me to read the screenshots?" You could have heard a pin drop. Marissa's face lost color. Caleb spun toward her like he wanted her to deny everything for him. She just stood there. That was the first crack. Then the second came from a place I never expected. My father arrived late and stopped 3 steps behind them. He had clearly heard enough. He looked at Caleb and said, "Stop." Not soft, not tired. Sharp. Everybody froze. Caleb stared at him. My mother stared too. My father stepped closer and said, louder, "Stop lying. Stop blaming her. Stop all of it." I forgot to breathe. He turned to my mother and said, "You taught him this," and I let it happen. I had never heard my father say a sentence that honest in my life. My mother looked furious and frightened all at once. She said, "This is not the place." He said, "No, this is exactly the place, because you used every other one." Then he looked at me, in front of everybody, and said, "I'm sorry." Just that, no excuse, no speech, no little softener at the end. I did not forgive him in that second life is not that neat, but I believed him, and that mattered. Caleb looked around and realized the room was gone. He had lost it, the stage had turned. Then, in pure panic, he said the worst thing he could have said. He shouted, "If she'd just split it, none of this would have happened." There it was, clean, public, unhidden, a confession shaped like a complaint. I watched the understanding move across the faces around us. My mother closed her eyes for 1 second. Marissa whispered, "Caleb, too late, way too late." The venue manager opened the gate and said, "You all need to leave now." 2 of Daniel's cousins stepped forward too. Not aggressive, just solid present. My mother grabbed Caleb's arm. He yanked free once, looked at me and said, "This isn't over," and for the first time in my life I smiled at him without fear. I said, "Yes, it is." He left. They all did. The entrance stayed quiet for 1 long beat. Then Lena clapped once and said, "Okay, great, let's get married." Everybody laughed. Real laughter, the kind that releases pain instead of hiding it. I laughed too, though tears were running down my face. Then I married Daniel under glass and white lights, in a room where nobody asked me to shrink to keep the peace. It was the happiest day of my life. Not because it was perfect, because it was true. After the wedding, things moved fast. The fake reports, fake statement, attempted title contact, and camera footage stopped looking like family mess and started looking like what? They were fraud, harassment, unlawful entry attempts. I'm keeping those details simple. What matters is that paper trails matter. Texts matter, screenshots matter, voicemails matter. Truth likes records. My mother somehow stayed out of the worst legal consequences through careful denials and a very expensive lawyer. Caleb did not. Marissa moved out before the year ended. Apparently, greed is less romantic when it gets subpoenaed. The public gossip flipped the way it always does when facts finally show up. People who had quietly believed I was heartless suddenly had kind things to say. I did not need them to. That was new too. Not needing the late rescue. My father started therapy. Again, I'm not writing a fairy tale. He did not become brave overnight, but he started telling the truth in smaller rooms. Once, months later, while helping me clear brush on the lot, he said, "I spent years thinking quiet made me decent. I think it just made me useful to the loudest person in the room." I said, "Yeah." We stood there with rakes in our hands and let that be. And enough. As for my mother, she still tells her version to anyone willing to listen. In her version, she was caught between 2 difficult children. In her version, she tried her best. Maybe she believes that. People can believe almost anything if it keeps their reflection intact. I stopped trying to correct every lie. That job had eaten enough of my life already. I only correct what touches my work, my marriage, or my peace. Everything else can drift. The brick house sold a year later on my terms, not theirs. I cried the day I handed over the keys. Not because I regretted it, because it had held the only love in my family that did not ask me to disappear first. The commercial lot became something better than any of them deserved to imagine. Daniel and I built a small community office space with a cafe on the corner. We named the cafe Edie's Table. On opening morning, I unlocked the door before sunrise and stood alone in the dark for 1 minute. The air smelled like paint, coffee, and possibility. My hands shook a little when I switched on the lights. Not from fear, from awe. People came then. More people came. Then the line reached the sidewalk. Lena cried into a muffin. Daniel burned the first tray of scones and pretended it was a tribute to imperfection. My father came at noon carrying a small pot of rosemary. He held it out and said, "She always kept one by the back steps." I took it. We looked at the plant instead of each other. Then I said, "Thanks, Dad." That was enough. Sometimes healing is not a speech. Sometimes it is a plant, a doorway, and 2 people trying not to waste a second chance. A year has passed now. I'm writing this upstairs while the lunch crowd hums below me. There's flour on my sleeve. There's coffee on the desk. There is a wedding photo in a frame beside the window where I am smiling in a way my younger self would not recognize. Every now and then, someone asks if I regret exposing everything at the greenhouse. No, I regret that it became necessary. I regret the years before it, when I confused endurance with love and silence with maturity. I regret every time I made myself smaller so other people could stay comfortable. But I do not regret the truth. The truth cost me a role. It gave me a life. That trade was worth it. The strangest part is this. For years, my mother acted like I was hard to love because I noticed too much. Caleb acted like I was dramatic because I remembered accurately. My father acted like I was difficult because I would not help bury everything forever. But the problem was never that I saw too much. The problem was that they needed me not to speak. And once I did, the whole machine broke. The last clear thing Nana ever said to me was in the hospital 2 days before she died. I had adjusted her blanket and was trying not to cry because she looked tired. She squeezed my hand and whispered, "You do not have to pay to belong." I did not understand it fully then. I do now. Belonging that has to be purchased with silence is not belonging. Love that only arrives when you're useful is not love. Family that survives by feeding on one person's self-erasure is not family. So no, I did not lose my family at my wedding. I lost a job. I lost the role of person who absorbed everything to keep the room comfortable. And in the space where that role used to be, I built a marriage, a business, and a life that finally feels like mine. Turns out, Nana was right. The reward for showing up is not that unfair people become fair. It is that one day, if you keep choosing truth, you stop needing unfair people to explain your worth. And for the first time in my life, I did not feel volunteered. I felt free.